Hey everyone, and welcome to the Therapeutic Podcast. As the name suggests, this podcast is everything about therapy and mental health, hosted by two counseling psychologists who have a lot to say, and who would otherwise just sit beside a fireside and talk about it. So instead, here we are. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy.
Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to the Therapeutic Podcast. It's been quite a bit of time, but we are happy that we are back here again after certain life-changing life changes. we are we are both back here to discuss and gotten the time to be psychologically involved in each other's lives again. So here we are with a new and fresh topic, and today it is a little uncomfortable and a little personally involved topic for us, which is parentification of a child, which in simpler term, it basically means a role reversal when a child in a family has to act like the parent, and the parent who is supposed to be taking care of the child is in a reverse role, and the child has to take upon responsibilities for the household, sometimes even financial, and most of the time it's emotional, being there for the parent as opposed to the parent being there for the child. So we are going to discuss in this episode how, in what conditions this can happen, and what effects it has on the child eventually, and when they become adults, as the parentified child, how does it manifest in their lives, in their relationships, and what possible outcomes we can discuss, or how can it be dealt with in your adult life. I think it's going to be a very emotional but also a fun topic, and I think a lot of us are going to be relating to it. Actually, while I was reading about it also, I could not help but think about all my clients that I work with, and how most of them have this concept in common, that at some point in their lives they were parentified. They were in a role which was not developmentally supportive of them or appropriate for them. At a very young age, they were supposed to take care of their parents or take the role of an adult in very early in their lives. And I think I can see that effects of it panning when they come to me for therapy. What do you think about this, Zainab? When you were preparing for this topic, what came to your mind?
I think it's the exact same thing that, like you said, you thought of your clients. I also did think of my clients, and my client base is students, right? Younger, proper children. So sometimes we are always told that children don't have the ability to understand, and, like, when we tell them you have to get into others' shoes, they can't. Sometimes it's even difficult for them to understand it. You have to share things with them because they don't have it. For them, it's their thing. They don't understand the concept of sharing. So
Mm.
when I think about such young children being pushed into becoming a parent, it just means that their entire childhood is gone because they are children. They're not ready for that kind of responsibility. They're hardly responsible for themselves, but they're expected to take care of,
An
people
entire
all
family
around them.
unit. Yeah.
Yeah. And if it's a family with two or three siblings, or even if it's just an only child, at the end of the day you have to take on the role of a parent, either because your mother's, not helping, or your father's not helping, which is just extremely tragic.
I think now that you've said this, let's segue into what does it mean when we say, or how it can happen when we say that a child has been parentified. One of which you mentioned already, that when a parent is unavailable or completely absent in a child's life for various reasons, maybe they are situationed into a different city or a place altogether, or when a parent is mentally unfit or dealing with their own physical or mental issue, and emotionally unavailable parents. This is kind of not very outwardly visible, but I think it's prevalent in most of the houses, at least if we speak about Indian households. And I think one of the examples that I can give to understand this better is that, because it's not very conspicuously visible to us, right? So we can say that, let's say when you go to a parent to discuss any kind of hurt that you have gotten because of them or because of any kind of family situation, you go to them for seeking support, right? And to for them to understand this what you're going through. But you're often met with a guilt trip of them saying, "Ki, do you think it's easy to deal with the situation that I'm in? Do you think it's easy to raise two kids? Do you want to be in my position and see what it's like?" But your emotions of hurt is completely neglected at that time, and it's always sort of met with a guilt trip and them complaining about or presenting their situation but not really accepting yours. So this also a form of emotional neglect or emotional unavailability that we're talking about here. Yeah.
Yes, I think also a lot of the times in my work environment also, I see parents who come in and complain of how their children don't understand how hard they're working. Of course, I've had times when parents have broken down into tears and they've said, but I'm working so hard and they don't understand. I'm sending them to such a good school and this and that, but they don't really get it and look at the way they're behaving. While I do feel bad for the parent, I feel even more bad for the child because probably the child is not getting that kind of attention. The
Hmm.
child is not getting heard at home. And sometimes the only way is for the child to act out, for the parent to suddenly be like, oh, this is what's happening. Either that can happen or it can turn into the child becoming the parent, where the
Yes.
child understands too much. Where I have seen a case of a child where the child is hyper aware of everything, and the child is around 5 or 6 years old. The child sees, even in the classroom setting, you see the child, and the child is very bothered about everybody else. You're supposed to be quiet right now. Why are you not standing when the teachers asked
Hmm.
everybody to stand? But they're talking while you're also talking, ma'am. They shouldn't be doing this. But look at the handwriting, it's terrible. They can't be writing this way. These are not the issues that a child who's of 5 or 6 years old is supposed to have. The child's supposed to be probably throwing pencils and erasers and just not being bothered about what others are doing. But for that child to be so aware, it it also translates, the same kind of behavior at home, because the child knows exactly when the mother is speaking to her mother, what kind of conversation happens. The child knows that if the mother's upset and that's why she's speaking to, her mother right now. And if there's a fight between both the parents, the child is aware, the child knows what is going to happen next. So the child is actually also preparing her older brother that Acha, see, this is
Wow.
going to happen. And the older
Mhm.
brother, I mean, is entering his teenage years. So when you look at it, you realize, oh, but this is such a small child. Why this has happened? That's probably because the child was made to, start behaving this way.
This actually reminds me of how people sometimes call teenagers a very mature child. And I don't think it's a compliment at all, because you can see where the maturity of handling these situations is coming from when you have to be the mediator between your parents when they are fighting, or you have to be the mediator, or you have to be the shoulder for them to cry upon. And I think I understand that, of course you learn to be supportive with that, you learn to be empathizing with people, but when it is a continuous thing that they are the ones relying on you for emotional support, on the child for emotional support and not vice versa, you know how it can be, quote unquote, lead to a child becoming more mature.
Like at least in girl friendships, there's a thing called the mother of the group.
Oh yes.
When you actually look, like, try to figure out why this person is the mother of the group, you realize, oh, this is why. Like, probably there are things happening at home. And that's why. And sometimes I've even noticed that even an only child can also turn into the mother of the group,
Hmm.
where that kind of thing that an only child is supposed to be spoiled and they really don't care about other things and they're too caught up in their own feelings, but sometimes that's not the case.
Yeah, I think the factor of responsibility plays a big role, right? Like they always feel responsible to be doing things in a certain way, in the right way, in a structured way. And in a way, you can really see that the child in them has eventually just faded away, taken a back role.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned this, because I was actually looking for, certain movie examples, and when I was reading about it, and the best character that came to me was Maeve from Sex Education. She actually was the younger child, as opposed to what we would believe that this would the parentification would happen to the elder child mostly, but it's not the case. And research has shown that the younger child actually gets affected by this more. And I saw that, Maeve was a perfect example for this. Their mother was physically and emotionally and mentally absent. She was also an alcohol addict. The brother was nowhere to be found. He only came when he needed money. And she was the one who was adulting all alone. And it was, we could see certain aspects of it manifesting also, right? Like we could see that when she went to meet the first boyfriend's parents, right? Who's the class president, I forgot the name, but it was a very nice household. He had both his parents present there, and somehow about the environment she found very uncomfortable to be in. Self-esteem was very low, and she often thought that she doesn't deserve to be in an environment like that. And so all these things, all these thoughts came to me when I was reading about this. And I think Maeve is a perfect example for a parentified child. And there was also this Bollywood movie called Secret Superstar. She was the eldest child here, and she was the secret singer who used to post her videos online, and she was, found by someone. But her parents had a toxic relationship. They used to fight, and mother had no say in anything that she in the deciding of the house. And the daughter used to see all of these things, and she was often the mediator between them, protecting her mother from the emotional and the physical violence. So she took on the role, and I remember even in one scene she went to a lawyer in a different city and got divorce papers, and then came back and gave to her mother. And this is when she was in middle school, I think. At that age she had grasped the situation so nicely that she felt like she needed to protect her mother, and was not vice versa.
Yeah. I think, and also in both these examples that you've given, like you said, we'll speak about why parentification happens. So in the first example that you gave of Maeve from sex education, the mother was using substances, and because of which she was absent from her child's life. In the second case, it was a case where the mother was getting abused by the father. So the toxic relationship that you spoke about is also abuse. So
Mm.
both of these factors also lead to parentification, because then the child has to step up. Because when the child realizes that, okay, like in the second example that you gave in Secret Superstar, she realized that the mother cannot stand up for herself. The mother,
Yeah,
even if the mother raises a voice, she's going to get slapped, she's going to get hit. So then she decides to become the voice. She decides to protect everybody and become the person, which actually from the movie, it reminds me of a scene as well where they're flying, and the daughter goes in and gives hands over the passports, and then she tells the person at the desk, telling them that I want these three seats together, and the other two you can put them behind us, I don't care. So basically she's talking about the mother and the brother and her being seated together, and asking for the
right.
father and mother to be seated elsewhere.
Mm.
So even things like this, where you suddenly take charge and you're like, okay, no, my mommy's not gonna do anything, she cannot. The concept is she cannot, she's the victim. You don't expect her to take care of you. So you step up and you're like, okay, you know what? I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to take care of my brother. I'm going to take care of everything else. Which actually what happens in the movie as well. She ends
Yeah,
up becoming the earning person in the household at such a young age, a proper parentified child.
yeah. Sometimes these situations are very much glorified, right? Like when they become an adult, these qualities, so-called qualities, are seen as, oh, you're so responsible, oh, you're so mature, and oh, you're so together, and how can you manage all these things so nicely? It's because they've gotten the practice to do that. But we fail to see how much of the inner child in them has been killed almost. I mean, sorry for the extreme words, but yeah, that is what happens. They've never gotten the chance to be the kid ever in front of their parents or in front of themselves. They had to take responsibilities at a very young age. And I also see that when adults realize this, when they are, in their mid 20s or late 20s, or whenever when they realize this, it comes at a great deal of loss to them. Like, it's almost like grieving their lost childhood, which they never got. And sometimes it can manifest in a great sense of anger and hurt and pity for their own self. Ki, I never got to live that, and probably never will, because I'm not that at that age anymore. Yeah.
I think it also leads to burnout, no, after a certain age where you're like, I don't think I want children anymore. I don't think I
Oh,
want like
yes. Mm.
this kind of a relationship because I don't want to be taking care. Either you get into a relationship where you end up taking care of people all the time, or it goes to an extreme where you're like, no, I don't want to be doing this. I've done this all my life. And like you said, it comes with a great sense of loss, right? That you lost out on that entire time. And we've actually spoken about this before as well, about how childhood actually impacts your entire life.
Yeah.
Everything gets impacted, like all the things that you mentioned. And also adding on to that is about how they also become extremely aware of other people's feelings.
Yes.
And by feelings, I mean mood shifts. When they look at a person, and even by the way the person says hi, they know that something's off. Like, so they're so hyper aware of things because that's what they've done all their life. They've only observed their parents. They've seen, okay, if there's a mood shift, they need to be the pacifier immediately.
Mm.
If the father's come home and is in a bad mood and the child knows that something's going to happen, they immediately try to diffuse the situation. So if you actually look at it from a distance, you realize how tiring that can be. Like, it is so tiring to constantly be aware, to know what is happening all around you. So sometimes it also makes me wonder, when do they get the time to feel their own emotions?
Exactly.
When do they get the time to relax and just be like, oh, I'm tired today? But I'm very upset because who does a child go and tell that they're upset to? Like, who? If the sibling is younger than them or older than them, and let's say the sibling is moved away for,
Mm.
studies or work or something, and they're the only person available. Parent, you obviously can't go to. So that's when and I also think then it ends up where they don't really care about, not care, but they don't know how to care about their own feelings, where they always learn to put other people before themselves,
Mm.
which is heartbreaking.
It is a very lonely process when you mention it like that, right? And it also makes me think how individuality is also lost at some point because you're so much involved and used to seeing putting other people's needs first and seeing how they are doing because that's what hypervigilance leads to. It almost seems like as you said, you don't have the time to think about yourself, then you don't know what you're feeling then. And there almost seems like when you grow up or when you become come at an age when you need to do things for yourself or think about what I like, what I do, what kind of career do I want, or what kind of relationship do I favor, it almost comes with a blank
Yeah,
because you've never gotten a chance or time to think about that for yourself. So the individuation process sort of has not happened for them, comes at a later stage.
yeah.
I think there's a
I think that
concept also, right? Like the
how
separation, individuation that is supposed to happen like almost after teenage and right, like in your 19 and 20s, when you separate from your parents and try to find your own life, that
yeah,
seems to not happen for them.
that's true.
So I also read that parentification can be of two types. One
Mhm.
is called the instrumental parentification, and the other is emotional parentification. So the idea is that, sometimes when kids are often given adult like duties, which can include doing daily household chores, so cooking or laundry, maybe, handling minor financial things. And that is done under probably, done under parental supervision or maybe not, but these are the kind of practical duties that children are given often, that would come under instrumental parentification. And emotional parentification is literally emotional dependent of the parent onto their child and dumping their emotions on them. The feeling of safety is reversed. The child does not feel, the parent comes to the child for safety and emotional dependence. So those were the two kinds that research defines as parentification. And I think because of that, we've also I've come across a research that says that there are probably certain positive aspects attached to parentification. And when I say this, it almost feels like I am, I don't think I can make justice to that. But research says so. So I do have to mention this. The positive aspects come in the form of, and I think I can agree with this, like, the self reliance or the resilience, the responsibility, or because they've been training to become an adult their whole life. So adult life comes a little bit with a soft blow compared to other people, I would say. So, in that way, it is considered to be a little positive. Although it's not favored in any way in research paper, I should clarify that. But when it is said in this way, ki, uh, actually instrumental parentification, like giving small responsibility to kids under parental supervision, can be beneficial to teach them the daily things that we every adult needs to know. But then there
Yeah.
are certain conditions that are required for you to do that. Or let's say if a parent is under emotional parentification has happened and the parent is not really available for the kid, it can also depend, like let's say if you have another adult presence in your life which is equally meaningful, equally connected to you, let's say a grandparent or an uncle or an aunt or anyone like an adult in your life, that can also usually impact this. And if you were in a position where you had to take care of your sibling, your perception towards the whole situation also affects how it is going to impact you a lot. How you see your sibling, how is your relationship with them, it can lead to maybe having a better parent child relationship even if you were parentified. So these situations are very, very important to consider when we say that parentification has positive effects.
I think the positive effects also, when you spoke about resilience and adulthood comes with a soft blow. If I try to look at the positive, I'll also see the negative. I mean, because if you're talking about resilience, that is the kind of resilience I don't think a child should have. I mean, I
No, I mean
work
when
to get,
they say resilience, they mean like it develops in their adult life.
yeah,
They are more
yeah,
resilient that way. Mm.
okay.
Mm. Yeah, but I do see your point. Like it's very difficult to see the positive side to it. I've also noticed that when you are in this situation, especially when dismissal of emotions has come to you a lot during your childhood, there's always this constant push and pull between the guilt you feel about being your own person and then not being there for the other person, for the family
Yes,
or the unit that you're with.
yes.
Right. So you always feel guilty when you want to do something for yourself, even though you know that it is politically correct, let's say, or socially correct, emotionally correct, in any way correct it can be, but it would still come with a burden or a weight of guilt for you. You also feel a lot of, you feel that you are a burden for other people when you start to do things for yourself. That's why even saying no can come with a lot of difficulty to some people. You don't know how to put yourself first, and so that's why you take on a lot of things, and then again it leads to burnout. I think we're going into a vicious cycle here. But yeah, this push and pull, I think I've also felt that, and burden that I have to unnecessarily take upon, the guilt that I have to take upon, which in no way is not required for me to do something for myself. I think that is very frustrating.
Yes, if I could right now, I'd be on top of a mountain screaming yes 100 times. Because that is so true what you've said. Especially the not being able to say no part
Mm.
is so true. Because amount of guilt that a person feels when even a slight no. And the thing is, let's say you slowly learn how to say no, you immediately give them a compensation. No, but okay, you know what? I'll do this then. Okay, no, I can't do this now, but just give me 5 minutes and I'll get back to you. What I've noticed is there are people who can just say no. There is no explanation needed. It's a no. I'm busy. I can't do it. The other person is fully capable. Let's say in this case, the parent is fully capable to do it by themselves, of course, but they need that help. So then the guilt comes in. Arey, but I'm a child. I'm their daughter. I'm their son. How can I say no? And then
Mm.
you end up doing it. But then at the same time, you also end up like not hating yourself, but questioning yourself as to why you couldn't say no. This was the time you stand up for yourself. So yeah,
Yeah.
it can.
I also want to say that all these effects and the impacts that we're talking about are very individualistic. So if you find something that we have talked about here and you relate with it, please do consider talking to a professional about it before, saying that you've been parentified or not. Like, let's not jump into conclusion, is what I mean. Also, when you said that self doubt is again a pretty big factor that comes in, especially when it comes in very small decisions, it builds up to bigger frustrations. And we don't realize that. But, these small questionings that we have to do for ourselves, ki, is it okay for me to buy this? Is it okay for me to say no here? Oh, but they would feel bad about this. Oh, and it also comes when you reverse the situation, when someone says a direct no to you, it can feel hurtful to you because you're not used to it. And then you feel wronged. And how can they do that when I've been available for them for so many
Yeah.
times? And then it is an added frustration and added anger that you have to deal with. And then that feels unfair again.
Yes. It also comes to a point where you suddenly feel like, oh, but they can say no, why can't I say no? Like there's also a sense of jealousy that kicks in
Yes.
where you start admiring the person ki, acha, how easily that person has said no. There was obviously no thought behind. They didn't want to do it. They've said no and they've moved on. That's it. But at least for me, I'll have to think 100 times before saying no. So, like you said, it makes full sense now because then we end up tagging that person also like this person is so rude. Like, look at them.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there was this also saying that no is a full answer, like a whole
Yes.
answer.
It's a
You
full
don't need to have,
sentence.
yeah, and
Mm.
you don't need to have a prefix or a suffix. It's just a no.
When you talked about jealousy, it also came to me that when these parentified kids have their own children, a sense of jealousy can also come upon them when they see their kids having that kind of freedom or having that kind of support which they did not have in their childhood. And again, I think it's a very understandable human quality, right? Like being jealous of your kids can come as a very negative thing for parents, like, oh, why am I feeling this of my own kids? But it's totally understandable. And
Yeah.
you because it's you grieving your own childhood. Yeah.
I think that's the case with most mothers, actually, I would like to say. I am not mentioning fathers because I have not had any interaction with any fathers that have openly spoken about this. But I think with mothers, sometimes they do drop small hints here and there. So, at least with the way women have evolved, you can see how, by women have evolved, I mean women's rights also, where one mother not being able to fight against the father or the family for wanting to study, but then the daughter is given a chance keep acha, go out and study,
Right.
go out
Yeah.
and hang out with your friends, even if they're boys, it's okay. All of those things happen. So when we talk about the jealousy, we're not saying the mother's trying to sabotage the child's life in any way. It's just I think the jealousy is equivalent to longing,
Yeah.
that you're actually longing that that is the kind of life you wanted. That's why you decided to give your child that kind of life. But when you look at it, you're like, I think I also deserved it somewhere.
Yeah, very much so. It's completely understandable. I think a
Yeah.
shout out to all the mothers and the parents who have been feeling this. And I think,
Yeah.
it's important for them to know that it's completely normal and that we understand where you're coming from.
Yep.
Yeah. I want to discuss briefly the cultural aspect also attached to this. Because, when we think about individuation or separation from their parents or having your own independent life, it's a bit dicey if we discuss about how Indian tradition is. We are not expected to be leaving our parents' house when we go off to college, or it's almost expected of us to take care of them beyond a certain age, financially, emotionally, and physically also. So what do you think of this when it comes to parentification? Because I've seen that in research papers also it is shown that Indians were more accepting of the whole concept of parentification, accepting as in, it was familiar to them in those
Yeah.
ways and compared to their American counterparts. So, yeah, I mean, regarding that, I think it comes very like it's a very similar territory to us, that we understand that, oh, this is bound to happen or this is going to happen. But I think there's also a huge difference when it is done to you after a certain age, like when you're 18, 20, or beyond that, and when it is done to you when you're 5, 6, or 11-year old.
I think the thing is also, like you spoke about culturally, it's been ingrained in us that we are not an individualistic society.
Mm.
We are a group. We live in families, we live in societies as a group. So that's why maybe I think Indians are more accepting of this. Because, like you said, even if they do accept that they've been parentified as a child, somewhere they feel like, Acha, okay, but I still have to, take care of them. I still have to, work through the differences. They don't have anybody else. Like, if anybody's watched Pico, it's about a father and a daughter. But I'm not saying Pico was parentified by the father, but the thing is that she had her moments where she was absolutely frustrated with her father. She did not want to be with him, did not want to stay with him, and even the other character also, Rana, who lives with his mother and his sister, and they absolutely irritate him. But then both of them have a conversation, Pico and Rana. They're sitting down and they're having a conversation, and Pico says, "But there are parents. You can't abandon them, na. You have to take care of them, and after a while, they turn into children. So you have to become the parent." Of course, that is at an adult stage where the children are well settled and now they can take care of their
Mm.
parents. But I think even as young children, it's put into our heads that they're your parents. You have to. This is family. We can do anything for family. It's okay. Which actually reminds me of even how therapy changes, because in the West, a lot of times they are asked, "Ki, acha, if your parent is so and so, or if somebody from the family is so and so, cut them out of your life. It's okay. You can just be like, oh, I don't want this particular person in this family gathering." In the Indian context, I don't think we can tell our clients to cut anybody off.
No,
That's
definitely not
absolutely
that
not
easily.
happening.
Yeah.
Exactly. The client also is just going to be like, oh, it's just so easy for you to say. How do you want me to go tell my mother that, oh, I'm going to cut you out of this family function? That's my mother. If our listeners have watched Dear Zindagi, Meenal, you would know what I'm talking about. That in the movie, you see that Alia Bhatt has clear issues with her parents, right? And
Yeah.
if it was in
Mm.
the West, or her getting therapy, they would have probably suggested her cutting off from her parents. But what happens in the movie is the therapist actually encourages her to go and have conversation with the parents, even if it's just for 10 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever. Try to build a relationship with them. So I think in the end of the movie, we also see that she has a slightly better relationship with the parents than what it was in the beginning of the movie. So I
Mm.
think that's what happens culturally also, no, in the Indian context.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think culturally, not just parentification, the aspect of parentification, but also the therapy is affected by it equally. How we see our clients and how we can. Actually, this brings to me to this discussion also. What do you think can be done when we, once as adult, realize that we have been parentified at some point of our lives? I mean, of course, that a lot of things can be resolved with therapy, professional help of any kind. Like outside of that space, also, what can be done?
If, let's say, you're not in therapy, but you've realized something like this has happened, so just baby steps would be to just start doing things that make you happy. This actually reminds me of those posts that come on Instagram where they talk about when you suddenly realize you're an adult and you can have cake after 10 p.m. but you
Yeah.
have to brush your teeth. So something like that, something extremely tiny, very minute, but things that you actually wanted to do, but you never could do or never had that kind of space to do, but now you can. So maybe start doing those little things, because obviously what has happened. And there is no way we can go back and fight with our parents about it. Of course, we can sit and discuss it with them. But then again, if your parent didn't understand then, they're probably not going to understand that now as well. So the best thing would be to focus on what makes you happy, to do the things that you've always wanted to do, maybe little things. Try to build a life for yourself where you're surrounded by people that are also giving and not just taking things from you.
Mm.
What
Mm.
do you think?
I think just the acknowledgement of the fact that this has happened with you can come with a lot of grief, anger, and self pity, and all the things, all the emotions that we talked about, right? So, giving yourself that space, because it's not going to come easily. All these emotions are not going to come easily. And if I just ask you to sit with it, I know that people will probably throw stones at me. But, but this is something that you might have to deal with, right? So, having people who support you in that way is going to be a huge, huge thing. And this also kind of makes me think about how it is difficult for us to receive things from others also when we've been in a situation of giving all the time. So that can because we already think that we might come off as a burden to some people, right? Even if we share our emotions like that. So the acknowledgement of it is going to come with a lot of difficult emotions. So just have that space for you. At least be kind to yourself if nobody else is doing that for you, or if you're not in a space to share that with others. At least once you've come to know about it and you know that these emotions are going to come to you, just be kind to yourself at least, and be give yourself a hug. And as Zainab said, give yourself small, small treats, a lot of self care, and yeah, a lot of love, because this would be your space. And at least in your own space, you should be able to feel what you're feeling without it feeling any kind of burden. Yeah. I want to give an honorary mention to, again, one of the Friends scene, where we see a classic example of, when Rachel's parents get divorced, and in one of her birthdays, both of them show up, and
Yes.
it's very fresh and
Yes.
it's very new, and they're bickering every time they see face to face. And so she has to go from one room to another, catering to her mother first and then catering to her father, and this is whole like of mediation that she has to do between her parent. And I think it's a very classic and a good example for how, although again she's an adult when we talk about this, but yeah, if it happens at a younger age or at any age, it is still very difficult to deal with.
As
And
usual.
kuch kuch hota hai, I
Definitely.
think. Kuch kuch
Ah,
hota hai. The
classic.
girl is, yeah, she's I think 8 to 10 years old, and
Only 8 years old.
she's been given the responsibility to not only find another wife for her father, and to also be okay with the fact that there's another person in replacement of her mother. And I'm not sure like
Yeah.
how an 8-year-old or a 10-year-old is going to deal with that.
I think in this case, I don't know who's more at fault. Is it the dead mother or the father or the grandmother who's very alive and encouraging of the daughter, the granddaughter? Because just the dead mother writing letters to her daughter. And once you turn 8, you go look for this girl named Anjali. She was your father's first love. And then the grandmother being like, oh, yeah, 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 let's go, let's go. And maybe the father also just being a little irresponsible. And there's this scene, right, where he's looking for the daughter and he goes like on air. He's speaking to somebody who's taking an interview and he's like, oh, I miss you, and come back, and who's gonna do this and who's gonna do that. Like that is
Oh
how he's
yeah,
calling the daughter back,
yeah.
which is weird because you don't ask an 8-year-old that, so if you're gone, who's gonna do this for me? So I think all the factors were just pushing her to become a parental child there.
I think ultimately it's the fault of Karan Johar and no one else.
I think there's too many flaws in that movie, but it's okay. Any other examples that you can think of, Mira?
Uh, so actually, I have another example of people who have watched Schitt's Creek. It's a 6-season series on Netflix, and the character David and Alexis, who are two kids of the parents who were very rich, but then suddenly became poor. The mother was an actress into the Hollywood world, and the father was a fast growing business CEO, founder and CEO. So you know how their lives were. They were not very involved in their children's life, and emotionally, physically distant and unavailable. And they are also a classic example of being parentified, because David, he was the elder brother. It's shown with stories that David used to take care of Alexis a lot, how this has manifested in their adulthood. But it's also a very classic and a great, great story of how a family heals together again when they lose all of their money and they have to physically stay in a very close and a small place together, forced to do that. And so how their relationships grow and heal, and all of these things happen together. It's a very beautiful series. In that series also you can see signs of David being parentified, and Alexis too. Right. I think with all these filmy examples and us ending up back with Bollywood, Hollywood, and Friends, of course. So this is a sweet space for us to close off. In conclusion, I do want to say that you might come across a lot of examples where you might relate. Do consider this in mind, that all of these things are very personal, and what we have
Yep.
discussed is are very generalized facts, very true but generalized, and it may or may not completely align with what is happening to you. So if you've come across something that is very relatable to you, do consider talking to a professional or seeking help in case you need that. And of course, we are available for that.
Yes, please remember that all of this is just for educational purposes only.
Thank you and bye.
Bye bye.